The helicopter cut the night as Sentinel K rose from the Black Sea, an island erased from maps, supposedly empty. Inside, a special ops team sat ready, rifles steady, faces unreadable. At the rear, Emily Carter, combat medic, gear secured, hands calm. Beside her, a German shepherd lay still, eyes locked on the open door. "Didn't know medics flew this close," someone whispered. "And the dog?" Emily stayed silent. Some truths aren't argued. The briefing was simple: recon, extract, no civilians, no resistance, minimal risk. 2 minutes, the team stood, night vision down. The dog rose too, alert, certain. The map said the island was empty. The dog knew better. And before dawn, Emily would have to choose between orders and the lives she would not leave behind. The rain had stopped less than an hour ago. Over the Pacific, dawn arrived slowly, filtered through a ceiling of thinning clouds that left the air damp and metallic, as if the sky itself had been scrubbed raw overnight. Sentinel K emerged from the mist like a forgotten scar on the ocean's surface. Low hills, dense jungle, and jagged limestone teeth breaking the shoreline. From above, it looked empty, uninhabited. Just another unnamed island, lost between shipping lanes and classified maps. That was what the satellite said. The MH-60 helicopter cut through the humid air with a steady, disciplined roar. Inside, red cabin lights painted the faces of the team in dull crimson, flattening expressions into masks. Weapons rested between knees. Gloves tightened. No one spoke unless necessary. Emily Carter sat near the rear of the aircraft. She was 32 years old, average height, lean rather than slender, with the kind of strength built from repetition rather than gym mirrors. Her dark brown hair was braided tight against her scalp, practical and unadorned. A faint scar traced the edge of her jawline, barely visible unless the light hit it right. Her face carried calm more than softness, eyes a steady gray that missed very little. Across her chest was a medical kit secured with practiced precision. Not loose, not decorative. Every strap had been adjusted by someone who hated waste and trusted muscle memory more than luck. At her feet sat Ranger. The German shepherd was nearly 9 years old, large even by working dog standards, with a thick sable and black coat dusted lightly with gray around the muzzle. His ears stood tall, alert, though one bore a thin notch from an old injury. His amber eyes were sharp, unsettlingly intelligent, and fixed not on Emily, but on the open side door of the helicopter. Ranger did not pant. He did not shift. He watched. "Still can't believe they brought the dog," a voice muttered from the front. That was Sergeant Luke Ramirez, mid-30s, compact build, shaved head, the kind of man who filled silence with confidence, whether it was earned or not. He was a breacher, excellent with explosives, terrible with patience. "Relax," replied Staff Sergeant Owen Hale, the team's point man. Hale was tall, broad-shouldered, with weathered features and the posture of someone who had spent most of his adult life waiting for things to go wrong. "It's just a K9, probably here to sniff out old camps." "Old dog," Ramirez corrected. "Things past retirement age." Emily didn't look up. She had learned over the years which battles were worth engaging. This wasn't one of them. Ranger, however, let out a low sound. Not a growl, not a bark. Something quieter, a vibration in the chest. Emily felt it through the floor before she heard it. She rested 2 fingers lightly against Ranger's shoulder. The dog did not turn, but the sound faded. 30 seconds, the crew chief called. The Isai. Helicopter slowed, angling toward a narrow stretch of beach hemmed in by jungle and rock. The surf below was calm, deceptively gentle. No visible movement, no fires, no structures. Empty. The team rose in practiced unison, checking weapons, nodding without words. Emily stood with them. Her movements were economical, precise, matching the rhythm of the men around her without drawing attention. Captain Aaron Brooks stood near the ramp. Brooks was in his early 40s, tall and wiry, with sharp eyes and the controlled authority of someone used to command. His reputation preceded him. Methodical, disciplined, by the book. He noticed everything. He said very little. "Carter," he said, glancing her way. "Stay central. If anything goes sideways, you work behind Hale." "Yes, sir. And keep the dog tight." Ranger shifted at the sound of Brooks's voice, eyes flicking up briefly before returning to the jungle below. The ramp dropped. Warm, wet air rushed in, carrying the ibahofriti, scent of salt, decaying leaves, and something else, faint, almost chemical. Ranger stiffened. Emily felt it instantly. They hit the beach fast. Boots sank into wet sand. Hale and Ramirez moved forward, weapons up. The perimeter formed smoothly. The helicopter lifted away, its roar fading until only wind and surf remained. Silence rushed in to replace it. Too much silence. Emily crouched beside Ranger, unclipping the lead just enough to give him movement without freedom. The dog lowered his head, nose sweeping left to right. Then he froze, his muscles locked, his ears angled forward, his tail stilled. Emily's breath slowed. "What is it?" Hale whispered. Ranger took one step forward, stopped, let out the same low sound again, deeper this time. "Probably wildlife," Ramirez muttered. "Island's been empty for decades." Emily didn't answer. She knew Ranger's tells. She had trained with him for nearly 4 years before both of them had been quietly removed from frontline rotations. Wildlife made Ranger curious. This made him wary. She crouched lower, fingers brushing the sand. Damp, recently disturbed. "Captain," she said quietly. "Ranger's picking up something." Brooks turned, eyes narrowing slightly. "Satellite shows nothing." "Yes, sir." Ranger shifted again, nose lifting toward the jungle. Emily followed his gaze. For a moment, she wasn't on Sentinel K. She was somewhere else. Dust in the air, heat pressing down, the sound of shouting just out of frame. A rifle in her hands, a voice in her ear telling her to hold, and then the sound that had broken her, a child screaming. Emily blinked. The memory retreated, as it always did, leaving behind only the echo of the decision she had made, the order she had refused. She swallowed and focused. Ranger took another step, then another. His breathing changed, shorter, controlled. "He's tracking," Hale said. "No," Emily replied softly. "He's confirming." Dikfarm reached into her kit and adjusted a strap that didn't need adjusting. A habit, something to ground herself. Brooks studied the tree line. Nothing moved. 5-minute sweep, he ordered. Then we proceed inland. They moved. The jungle swallowed them quickly, vegetation closing behind as if they had never been there. Ranger moved at Emily's side, silent despite his size. Every few meters, he paused, sniffed, listened. He stopped near a cluster of rocks, half buried in moss. Ranger's hackles rose. Emily's hand tightened on his harness. "What do you see?" Brooks asked. Emily crouched, brushing aside leaves. There, pressed into the mud, a footprint, small, barefoot, not old. Her chest tightened. Ranger let out a quiet whine, then went still again, staring into the dense green ahead. Emily closed her eyes for half a second. The map wasn't wrong by accident. It was wrong by design. She stood and met Brooks's gaze. "Sir," she said evenly. This island isn't empty. Brooks held her eyes, searching for doubt, finding none. Behind them, Ranger growled, low, steady, certain. And Emily knew, with the same clarity she had felt years ago when she broke her last order, they were already too late to turn back. The jungle closed behind them, as if it resented being disturbed. Moist air clung to skin and fabric, heavy with the smell of wet earth and rot. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in broken shafts, never quite touching the ground for more than a heartbeat. The team moved deeper inland, boots sinking softly into mud layered with fallen leaves. Every step felt muted, swallowed by green. Emily Carter walked in the center of the formation. Ranger stayed close to her left knee, his movement controlled, deliberate. He no longer swept his nose wildly as he had near the shoreline. Now he worked in short, precise arcs, stopping at intervals that matched the team's pace almost perfectly. Too perfectly. Hale noticed it first. "That dog's keeping formation," he murmured, just loud enough for Emily to hear. "Not tracking like a normal K9. Emily didn't respond right away. Her eyes followed Ranger's line of sight as he paused, head angled slightly to the right, ears forward, body low. "He's not hunting," she said quietly. "He's clearing." Ranger moved ahead 2 paces, then stopped again, waiting. When Hale adjusted his position, Ranger mirrored the shift, subtly guiding the spacing between operators. Emily felt something tighten in her chest. This wasn't instinct, this was training. They reached a shallow clearing where the jungle thinned around a cluster of limestone outcrops. The ground here was firmer, less overgrown. Ramirez knelt first. "Hold," he whispered. Emily crouched beside Ranger as Hale swept the area. Ramirez brushed aside a layer of leaves with the back of his glove. Something pale emerged from the mud. A shoe, small, blue canvas, the toe scuffed thin. A child's shoe. No one spoke. Hale straightened slowly. Brooks stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Could be old," Ramirez offered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Drifted in from somewhere else." Emily reached out before Brooks could answer. She lifted the shoe carefully. The fabric was still flexible. The sole hadn't cracked. The inside was damp, but not rotted. "Recent," she said. "Days, maybe less." Ranger let out a low sound, then turned his head sharply toward the rocks. He pulled once against the lead. Emily followed. Behind the outcrop, partially hidden by vines, lay a coil of plastic cord, cheap, industrial, the kind used for binding cargo, and people. Nearby, half buried in dirt, was a small metal cylinder, an old flashlight battery, its casing scratched and dented. Brooks exhaled slowly. "That's not on the brief," Hale said. "No," Brooks replied. "It's not." He looked at Emily, then at Ranger. "How sure are you?" Brooks asked. Emily didn't hesitate. "There are people on this island. Civilians. One of them is a child." Ranger lowered his head and pressed his nose to the cord. His body stiffened. His breathing changed. Shorter, faster. "He's picking up human scent," Emily continued. "Fresh, multiple individuals, and fear." Ramirez snorted softly. "Fear's not exactly measurable, Doc." Emily met his gaze. "It is to him." Brooks studied the ground, then the tree line. His jaw tightened, not with doubt, but calculation. Satellite showed no structures, no heat signatures, no movement. "Then the satellite missed something," Hale said. Brooks straightened. "Mission remains unchanged," he said firmly. "Primary objective stands. We log the findings, proceed as planned." Emily felt the words land like a physical weight. "Sir," she said carefully, "with respect." Brooks cut her off with a raised hand. "We are not here for search and rescue. We don't have confirmation, we don't have intel, and we don't divert based on assumptions." Ranger growled. Not loud, not aggressive, certain. Brooks glanced down at the dog. "Control him," he said. Emily tightened the lead, though Ranger hadn't moved. "He's telling us the truth," she said quietly. Brooks held her gaze for a long second, then he turned away. 5-minute sweep complete. We move." The order rippled through the team. As they resumed movement, Emily felt something shift, not around her, but inside. A familiar pressure. The beginning of that old divide between what was ordered and what was right. Ranger walked closer now, his flank brushing her leg. She rested her hand briefly against his shoulder, grounding herself. The jungle grew denser as they advanced. Vines hung low, snagging gear. The air buzzed faintly with insects. Ranger stopped again. This time, he didn't growl. He sat. Emily froze. Ranger only sat like that for one reason. She scanned the ground quickly. There, barely visible beneath a mat of leaves, a thin metal disc, pressure plate. "Mine," she whispered. Hale cursed under his breath as the team froze mid-step. Emily slowly shifted Ranger back, her movements careful, precise. The memory came unbidden. Different. Jungle. Different heat. Ranger younger then, his coat darker, his movements faster. They had been moving through a village path when he had stopped, just like this. Sat. Refused to move. She had trusted him. The explosion had gone off 2 meters to the left, ripping the ground open where another team would have stepped seconds later. Ranger had lunged, pulling her backward as debris tore through the air. She remembered the force of his body slamming into hers, the pain in her ribs, the smell of smoke and blood. Afterward, they called it luck. Later, they called her reckless. Emily blinked the memory away. Hale signaled the team back. Ramirez carefully marked the spot. "Good catch," Hale said, looking at Ranger with new respect. Ranger didn't acknowledge him. His eyes were fixed ahead, past the mine, past the trees. Emily followed his gaze and felt her stomach drop. There, tied loosely around a sapling, was a strip of cloth. Pink, faded, torn from a child's shirt. "Sir," Hale said quietly, "we need to reconsider." Brooks approached, took in the scene, the evidence stacking up around him like accusations. Still, he shook his head. "We stay on mission," he said. "We report once we're exfil." Emily felt the lie settle in her bones, not spoken aloud, but lived. Ranger rose suddenly, muscles tense. His ears flattened, then snapped forward. He took 2 steps, then stopped, staring into the jungle. Emily's heart pounded. She crouched beside him. "What is it?" she whispered. Ranger's nostrils flared. He inhaled deeply, then turned his head slightly, toward the team's rear. Emily understood. "They're moving," she said softly. "The people he smells. They're being moved." Brooks's jaw tightened. "There is no confirmation of hostiles," he said. "We don't act on hypotheticals." Ranger let out a sharp bark before Emily could stop him. The sound cut through the jungle. Everyone froze. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then, far off, something answered. A shout. Human, startled. Ranger dropped low, every muscle coiled. Emily closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. The map was lying. The mission brief was lying. And the most honest thing here was a dog everyone had dismissed as obsolete. Brooks raised his hand, signaling silence. The jungle seemed to lean closer around them. Emily looked down at Ranger, meeting his eyes. "You were never just support," she whispered. Ranger didn't look at her. He was already listening to the truth ahead. The jungle did not explode all at once. It tightened. The first shots cracked from the right flank, short, disciplined bursts that snapped branches and punched bark into splinters. The sound arrived a fraction before the pain, before the team understood what was happening. Hale dropped to a knee, firing back instinctively, while Ramirez rolled behind a fallen log, cursing as rounds chewed into the dirt where his head had been a second earlier. "Contact right!" Hale shouted. Emily didn't hear the order so much as feel Ranger react beneath her hand. The German shepherd surged forward without waiting for permission, his body low, powerful, dragging Emily sideways just as the jungle ahead of them erupted with automatic fire. Bullets stitched the space where she had been standing, tearing through leaves and air with a violence that made her ears ring. They hit the ground hard. Emily tasted blood and soil. Ranger shielded her with his body for half a heartbeat, then moved again, forcing her behind a thick root system that rose from the earth like a ribcage. The ambush closed from the rear. Shouts echoed through the trees, voices not panicked but coordinated, English, accented, commands, not cries. Whoever these men were, they had trained. Brooks tried to call it in. "Viper actual to Ghost?" Static cut him off. He slapped the radio, tried again. Nothing. "Radio's dead!" Ramirez yelled. A second volley came from the left. Hale returned fire, his shots controlled, measured, but the enemy wasn't breaking. They were shaping the fight, pushing the team inward, deeper into the jungle. Emily crawled to Hale's side, Ranger tight against her hip. "Two down," someone shouted. Corporal Evan Price lay 10 meters ahead, motionless, blood pooling darkly beneath his thigh where a round had torn through muscle. Near him, Specialist Noah Trent clutched his shoulder, teeth clenched against the pain, his weapon dropped beside him. Emily moved without hesitation. She slid to Price first, hands already working. The wound was catastrophic, femoral artery compromised. She applied a tourniquet high and tight, fingers slick, heart steady. Price groaned, eyes fluttering. "You stay with me," she said, her voice firm, anchoring him to the moment. Trent was next, shoulder wound, ugly but survivable. She pressed gauze, cinched a bandage, ignored the way bullets snapped overhead. Ranger hovered close, his body vibrating, not with fear, but with focus. His ears tracked movement Emily couldn't see. Then Ranger stiffened. He turned his head sharply toward the uphill slope and growled. Not the low warning from before. This was recognition. Emily followed his gaze and saw them. 2 dogs emerged from the foliage, moving in disciplined arcs. Belgian Malinois, lean, muscular, eyes hard. Their coats were sand-colored, blending perfectly with the terrain. Each wore a tactical harness, dark with use. Their handlers followed behind, rifles raised, trusting the dogs to flush the enemy forward. "Combat K9s, Hale muttered. "They brought dogs." Ranger's hackles rose. Emily felt his restraint fray beneath her hand. Not wild, not uncontrolled, but deliberate. He knew what those dogs were. He knew what they were trained to do. "They're pushing us," Ramirez shouted. "They want us moving." A sharp crack split the air. Brooks went down, hit in the side. He collapsed behind a tree, gasping, blood seeping between his fingers. Emily was already moving. She slid to Brooks, Ranger guarding her flank. The wound was bad, penetrating, bleeding heavily, but not immediately fatal. She packed it, applied pressure, her mind cataloging supplies, time, Options. The radio crackled once, then died completely. "We're cut off," Hale said. "No comms, no air." The Malinois surged forward. Ranger lunged before Emily could stop him. He broke formation, charging uphill with a speed that stole Emily's breath. One of Bio. The enemy dog snapped toward him, teeth flashing. Ranger met it mid-air, bodies colliding with a brutal force that rolled them both down the slope. Emily fired, not to kill, but to distract. Shots cracked near the handler's feet, buying seconds. Ranger and the Malinois separated, both scrambling back to their feet. Ranger's muzzle was bloodied, but his eyes were clear. He stood between Emily and the enemy, chest heaving, stance wide. The second Malinois circled. Emily saw the handlers adjusting, reading Ranger the way she read wounds. They know him, she realized. They know what he is. A sudden whistle cut through the chaos. The enemy dogs halted instantly, snapping back to their handlers' sides. A man stepped forward from the trees. He was tall, lean, with a beard threaded with gray. His eyes were cold, assessing. He wore civilian clothing beneath a tactical vest, a deliberate choice, someone who liked to blur lines. "Move," he ordered in accented English. "Take the prisoners inland." Behind him, shapes moved. Civilians, bound, shoved forward. Emily caught a glimpse of a woman with dark hair streaked with mud, her posture rigid despite the rope biting into her wrists. She was in her mid-30s, average height, thin from stress rather than hunger. Her eyes were sharp, defiant, scanning for opportunity even as she stumbled. A survivor. Beside her, a child cried softly. Emily's stomach twisted. The captives were pulled deeper into the jungle, disappearing between trees as the handlers fell back, dogs covering their retreat. The ambush wasn't meant to wipe them out. It was meant to delay. Hale cursed. "They're moving the hostages!" Emily knew it already. Ranger knew it too. He strained toward the fading scent, nails digging into earth. Brooks coughed, pain etched into his face. "We can't pursue," he said hoarsely. "We're wounded. We're blind." Emily looked at Ranger, then at the jungle swallowing the captives, whole. She felt the old fracture open inside her, the space where orders went to die. Ranger met her gaze, his breathing slowing, as if he understood the moment's weight. This wasn't just a firefight. It was a hunt, and the island had teeth. The jungle fell quiet in the way only a battlefield ever did, unnaturally, deliberately, as if holding its breath. Smoke from disturbed earth and torn leaves drifted low between the trees. The enemy had withdrawn just far enough to vanish, leaving behind only the wounded, the dead weight of unanswered questions, and the heavy certainty that they would return on their own terms. Emily knelt beside Captain Brooks as Hale finished reinforcing the bandage around his torso. Brooks's face had gone pale beneath the grime, his breathing shallow but controlled. He was conscious, lucid, and very much in command. "We hold," Brooks said, voice tight with pain but unyielding. "We consolidate here and wait for extraction. That's an order." Emily looked up at him. "Yes, sir," she said, automatically. But Ranger did not sit. The German shepherd paced in a tight arc, nose low, tail rigid. His breathing was fast now, uneven, and every few steps he stopped to sniff the air, then turned, sharply inland, ears pinned forward. Emily knew that posture. She rose slowly and followed Ranger a few meters away from the team, careful not to draw attention. Ranger stopped near a cluster of broken branches and churned soil, fresh signs of passage. He inhaled deeply, then let out a sharp, urgent whine that cut straight through her chest. Her hand tightened on his harness. "What is it?" she whispered. Ranger's head snapped toward the jungle interior. He pulled hard once, then froze, trembling. Emily closed her eyes and focused, shutting out the noise, the pain, the weight of Brooks's order. Fear had a smell. She had learned that years ago, not as a medic, but as a shooter, clearing rooms where terror clung to walls long after the people were gone. Ranger smelled it now, layered thick over the scent of oil, metal, and something sharper. Explosives. Her stomach dropped. She followed Ranger's line of attention, crouching low, near a trampled patch of ferns, half hidden. Beneath mud lay a length of wire, thin, purposeful, leading inland. "They're wiring their route," she murmured. "They're moving fast." Ranger pressed closer, his shoulder against her thigh, his entire body screaming urgency. Emily stood and turned back toward the team. Brooks watched her approach, reading her face before she spoke. "What is it?" he asked. "Sir," Emily said evenly, "Rangers picking up children, multiple, panicked, and explosives recently handled." Hale stiffened. Ramirez swore under his breath. Brooks shook his head. "We're not chasing ghosts. We're compromised, wounded, and blind. We wait." Emily held his gaze. "With respect, sir, if we wait, those kids don't make it." Silence fell. Brooks's eyes hardened. "That's not your call." Emily felt the fracture open fully now, the same one that had split her life in half years ago. Her mind slipped backward without warning. Dust, heat, a concrete courtyard bathed in late afternoon sun. A man dragged a bound woman forward, screaming. A child knelt beside her, hands shaking. The rules of engagement crackled in her ear, clear and absolute. No offensive action unless fired upon. Emily had seen the knife rise. She had seen the child's eyes. She fired anyway. The man fell. Then another, then another. 7 lives saved. Her career ended that day. The memory snapped away, leaving her standing in the jungle, staring at Captain Brooks. "I've been here before," Emily said quietly. "Waiting, trusting process over people. It costs lives." Brooks grimaced, pain flaring as he shifted. "You are a medic, Carter. You do not freelance missions," Ranger growled. The sound was raw, protective. Emily knelt beside him, resting her forehead briefly against his. His coat was damp with sweat and blood, his body taut with barely restrained force. Another memory surfaced. A training field, Ranger younger, faster, still wearing his original K9 patch. A simulated breach had gone wrong. A charge detonated late, throwing a soldier backward into debris. The handler hesitated. Protocol, safety, command structure. Ranger did not. He broke command, lunged, and clamped onto the handler's arm when the man tried to restrain him, dragging the wounded soldier clear just as secondary charges ignited. The soldier lived. Ranger was labeled unstable, removed. Emily stood. "I'm going after them," she said. Ramirez stared at her. "You're out of your damn mind." Hale looked between Emily and Brooks, jaw tight. "Doc, I'll take Ranger," Emily continued. "We move light, quiet. We don't engage unless necessary. I mark their route, confirm location, and pull back." "That's an order you don't have authority to give," Brooks snapped. Emily met his eyes, calm and unflinching. "I know." Ranger sat at her side, ready. Brooks breathed heavily, weighing pain, protocol, reality. "If you leave this perimeter," he said slowly, "you are acting without command authorization." "Yes, sir." "You may not come back," Emily nodded once. "Understood." For a long moment, no one spoke. The jungle hummed faintly around them, alive, waiting. Then Brooks looked away. 30 minutes, he said, voice low. If you're not back, we fall back to secondary rally and hope someone's listening. Emily didn't thank him. She turned, unclipped Ranger's lead, and melted into the jungle. They moved fast. Ranger led, weaving through foliage with impossible silence, choosing paths Emily would never have seen alone. She followed, counting steps, noting landmarks, marking subtle signs for a return that might never happen. The deeper they went, the stronger the sense became. Fear, sweat, chemicals. Ranger slowed near a rise overlooking a shallow ravine. Below, movement. Men, armed, and dogs. The Malinois again pacing on leashes, restless, and beyond them, figures huddled. Together, bound, forced onward. Emily's pulse hammered, but her mind sharpened. Ranger crouched beside her, eyes locked on the scene, muscles trembling with the need to act. Not yet, she whispered. Ranger obeyed, but barely. Emily knew then, with terrible clarity, that there would be no clean way out of this. No version where she stayed within the lines and everyone survived. She rested her hand on Ranger's shoulder. We were punished for this, she murmured, for doing the right thing. Ranger leaned into her touch, steady, resolute. Below them, a child stumbled. One of the men yanked the rope, dragging them forward. Emily's jaw tightened. She rose, decision made, the last barrier inside her finally gone. Orders no longer mattered, lives did, and together she and Ranger stepped into the path they had been trying to avoid since the island lied to them. Rain returned after midnight, not in sheets, but in a steady soaking fall that turned the jungle into a breathing thing. Water slid off leaves in endless whispers, masking sound and distorting distance. Somewhere deeper on Sentinel K, a generator hummed unevenly, coughing power into a place that was never meant to exist. Emily Carter lay prone on a ridge overlooking the camp. Below her, floodlights cut pale cones through the rain, illuminating a rough enclosure built from scavenged fencing, shipping pallets, and rusted wire. A prison made from whatever had been dragged ashore or flown in under cover of darkness. The men guarding it moved with lazy confidence, rifles slung low, shoulders relaxed, convinced the island itself was their greatest defense. Ranger crouched beside her, body pressed to the wet earth. The German shepherd looked carved from shadow, his black and sable coat darkened by rain, eyes reflecting light only when he tilted his head. A shallow gash ran along his flank, from the earlier fight, already clotted but stiffening his movement. He did not acknowledge the pain. He catalogued it and moved on. Emily checked her rifle for the third time, fingers calm, precise. Each round mattered. She had counted them twice already. You lead, she whispered. I'll follow. Ranger's ears flicked once in acknowledgement. They moved. The slope down toward the camp was steep and slick, but Ranger chose a path that kept them in shadow, moving from rock to root to fallen trunk. Emily followed exactly where he placed his paws, trusting his judgment over her own eyes. Twice, Ranger stopped and lifted his nose, scenting the wind. Each time, he altered course by a meter or two, avoiding unseen patrol lines. They reached the outer perimeter. 2 guards stood beneath a makeshift awning near the gate. One was young, barely more than a boy, his helmet oversized, rain dripping off the brim. The other was older, heavy-set, with a thick beard and tired eyes. He leaned on his rifle like a walking stick. Ranger froze. Emily waited. A third presence lingered just beyond the light, another dog. The Malinois emerged slowly from behind a crate, rain slicking its tan coat flat. It was younger than Ranger, maybe 4 or 5, muscles coiled, eyes alert, but uncertain. It hadn't seen Ranger yet. Emily exhaled. Ranger moved. He crossed the open ground in silence, hit the younger guard first, jaws clamping onto the man's forearm and dragging him down before a shout could form. The older guard spun, surprise widening his eyes. Emily fired once. The round punched through the man's shoulder, dropping him hard into the mud. He screamed, muffled by rain. Ranger released the first guard and turned toward the Malinois. The younger dog lunged, confused, aggressive out of training rather than malice. Ranger met it head on, not with teeth, but with presence. He slammed his body sideways, knocking the Malinois off balance, pinning it without breaking skin. He held it there, growling low, a sound that vibrated authority. The Malinois froze. Emily moved past them, securing the guards, tying hands with practiced speed. "Stay," she murmured to Ranger. He did, muscles trembling, eyes never leaving the other dog until Emily touched his shoulder again. Then he released, letting the Malinois scramble away, cowed and retreating into shadow. They entered the camp. The smell hit Emily immediately. Fear, sweat, unwashed bodies, and something sharper beneath it all. Chemicals, explosives, not stored carefully, rushed. The prisoners were held in a central enclosure beneath a torn tarp. 3 adults, 4 children. Sarah Whitman looked up when she saw Emily. Her face was bruised now, a cut along her brow crusted with dried blood, but her posture was the same, upright, protective. She had positioned herself between the children and the guards instinctively, even in captivity. "You came back," Sarah whispered. Emily nodded once. Quiet, the children stared at Ranger with wide eyes. One of them, a little girl with tangled hair and bare feet, reached out without thinking. Ranger stepped forward gently, lowering his head so she could touch his fur. Then the shot came. Not aimed at Emily. A guard at the far edge of the camp fired wildly toward the enclosure, panic overriding discipline. The round shattered a light and ricocheted, spraying metal fragments. The little girl screamed and stumbled. Ranger moved faster than thought. He surged forward, placing himself between the child and the next burst of gunfire. A round grazed his shoulder, tearing through muscle. He yelped once, sharp, surprised, but did not retreat. Emily felt something tear open in her chest. She fired twice in rapid succession. Both shots hit center mass. The guard fell. More shouting erupted beyond the fence. "We're out of time," Emily said. She cut the bindings, her hands steady despite the rain and blood. "Everyone move, now." Sarah scooped the smallest child into her arms without question. The others followed, fear lending them speed. Ranger staggered once, blood darkening his coat. Emily dropped to her knees beside him instantly. "No," she whispered. She pressed her hands to the wound, assessing. The bullet had passed through cleanly, missing bone. Painful. Dangerous if left untreated, but survivable. She pulled gauze from her kit, packed the wound, wrapped it tight. Ranger whined softly, breath ragged, but he stayed still, trusting her completely. "I need you," she said quietly, tying the bandage. "Just a little longer." Ranger licked her wrist once, then pushed himself upright. They moved as one. Emily covered the rear, firing only when necessary, placing shots low and precise to slow pursuit rather than escalate it. Ranger ran ahead and behind, herding the civilians, checking flanks, warning her with sharp barks when movement closed in. They burst through the outer fence as bullets snapped past, rain and mud exploding underfoot. At the tree line, Ranger faltered. Emily caught him, arm around his chest, half carrying, half guiding him forward. Sarah reached back, took one of the older children from another adult to free Emily's movement. "You don't leave him," Sarah said firmly, eyes fierce. "I won't," Emily replied. They vanished into the jungle as shouts and gunfire tore through the camp behind them. The rain swallowed the sound. Deep under the canopy, Emily finally allowed herself to stop. She knelt beside Ranger, checking the bandage, her hands gentle now, trembling only when the work was done. Ranger sank down, exhausted but alive, his breathing slow and steady. Sarah knelt across from them, rain streaking her face. "You didn't choose," she said softly, "between saving and fighting." Emily looked at Ranger, then back at Sarah. "I never have," she said. Behind them, the jungle closed, hiding the truth they had carved into the night. Dawn came pale and quiet, washing the jungle in a thin silver light that softened everything it touched. Rain had thinned to a mist, clinging to leaves and skin alike, and the island exhaled as if the night's violence had been a fever finally breaking. Emily Carter knelt beside Ranger at the edge of a narrow creek bed, checking the bandage one last time. The wrap was soaked through but holding. His breathing was steady now, slower than it had been hours ago, eyes bright despite the pain. He was lying on his side, head up, ears twitching at every distant sound, still working, always working. "Almost there," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Ranger thumped his tail once against the wet earth. Behind them, the civilians huddled under a canopy of broad leaves. Sarah Whitman stood apart, scanning the trees with the same vigilant posture she'd held since the first shot. In the thin daylight, the lines of exhaustion on her face were clearer. Creases at the corners of her, eyes from worry, not age. She was tall and spare, shoulders narrow, movements economical. There was nothing ornamental about her. Whatever life had taken from her, sleep, comfort, certainty, it had left her with something harder in return. The children were quieter now. Shock had dulled their panic into a fragile stillness. Sarah knelt beside them when they whimpered, speaking in a low voice, steady and calm, the way someone does when they've learned that panic is contagious. Emily rose and lifted her radio, turning the dial with careful fingers. "Viper Actual," she said. "This is Carter. I have civilians secured. Marking position now." For a heartbeat, there was only static. Then, clear, blessed sound. "Carter," Hale's voice crackled through, strained but unmistakably alive. "We see your signal. Sit tight." Emily closed her eyes. Ranger lifted his head sharply, ears forward, recognizing the distant thrum before Emily did. The sound grew steadily louder, pushing through the jungle's hush like a promise. Rotors. The helicopter broke through the cloud cover moments later, its shape resolving between the trees as it hovered above a small clearing Hale's team had secured. The wind flattened grass and sent leaves spinning. Hale appeared first, moving fast despite the limp in his step. Ramirez followed, weapon lowered, eyes wide as he took in the scene. "You actually did it," Ramirez breathed. Emily didn't answer. She guided Sarah and the children forward, one hand on Ranger's harness, steadying him as he rose. He moved stiffly, but under his own power, refusing to be carried. Brooks lay on a stretcher near the clearing, pale but conscious, eyes sharp. He watched Emily approach, watched Ranger limp at her side. "You disobeyed a direct order," Brooks said quietly. Yes, sir, Emily replied. Brooks's gaze shifted to the children, then to Sarah, who met his eyes without flinching. All civilians accounted for, Hale reported. No casualties. Brooks exhaled slowly and closed his eyes for a moment. Load them, he said. Everyone. The flight out was loud and cramped, the cabin filled with the smell of wet earth and antiseptic. Ranger lay across Emily's feet, head resting against her shin. She kept one hand on his shoulder the entire time, fingers brushing his fur in a steady rhythm that matched the pulse in her own wrist. The children watched him with quiet fascination. One of them reached out, tentative, and Ranger shifted just enough to allow it, eyes never leaving Emily's face. When they touched down on the deck of the support ship, the morning sun had fully broken free of the clouds. Medics rushed forward, voices clipped and efficient. Ranger was lifted carefully, his weight familiar and heavy, and Emily walked alongside him as far as they allowed before someone gently took her arm. We've got him, the medic said. He's going to be fine. Emily nodded, her knees suddenly weak. The debrief came later. A stark room, metal table, coffee gone cold, a recorder humming softly in the corner. Emily sat straight-backed, hands folded, Ranger absent from her side for the first time since the island. Across from her sat a man in a crisp uniform she didn't recognize. Commander Thomas Hale, Naval Operations, early 50s, silver hair clipped short, eyes sharp with intelligence rather than judgment. Walk me through your decision, he said. Emily did, calmly, precisely. She spoke of the scent Ranger detected, of the explosives, of the children. She spoke of the orders she broke and why. She did not embellish. She did not apologize. When she finished, silence filled the room. The door opened. Hale entered first, then Ramirez, then Brooks, pale but upright, supported by a cane. They lined up along the wall, an unspoken formation. She saved them, Hale said simply. All of them, Ramirez nodded. If she hadn't gone, we'd be writing condolence, letters. Brooks met Emily's eyes. I ordered her to hold, he said, and I was wrong. Commander Hale studied them for a long moment. Your record, he said finally, turning back to Emily, is complicated. Yes, sir. So is the world we operate in, he replied. We need people who can hold two truths at once. He closed the folder in front of him. This investigation is concluded. Emily's breath caught. Effective immediately, Commander Hale continued. You are reinstated with expanded authority, combat medic, tactical clearance when circumstances require it. You'll train, you'll be monitored, and you'll answer for your decisions. But you won't be sidelined again. Emily nodded once, throat tight. Thank you, sir. And your dog, he added, is a hero. Later, on the deck, Ranger lay stretched out in the sun, bandaged but content, tail thumping weakly when Emily approached. A new patch had been affixed to his, harness, temporary, unofficial, but unmistakable, recognition. Sarah stood nearby, holding a mug with both hands, steam curling up into the morning air. He didn't leave them, she said softly, nodding toward Ranger. Not once, Emily smiled. He never does. Sarah hesitated, then extended her hand. I don't know how to thank you. Emily shook it, firm and warm. You already did. You kept them together. Sarah nodded, eyes bright. That's what matters. The helicopter waited on the deck, rotors idling, the sea stretching endless and blue beyond the rail. Emily walked Ranger up the ramp, his pace slow but proud. As they lifted into the sky, the island receded beneath them. Green, quiet, no longer holding its secrets. Sunlight spilled through the open door, warming their faces. Emily rested her hand on Ranger's head. "No more choosing," she said quietly. Ranger leaned into her touch as the helicopter turned toward home. At the end of this story, the lesson is simple, and it is human. Life will often try to put us into boxes. One label, one role, one version of who we are allowed to be. But real life is rarely that clean. Emily was told she had to choose between being a healer and being a warrior. Ranger was told he was too dangerous to serve. Yet when the moment came, the world did not need rules. It needed courage, compassion, and the willingness to act when silence would cost lives. In our everyday lives, we face smaller versions of the same test. You may be told to stay quiet when something is wrong, to look away when someone needs help, to choose comfort over conscience. But sometimes, doing the right thing means stepping forward, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it carries consequences. This story reminds us that we do not have to abandon kindness to be strong, and we do not have to abandon strength to be kind. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from, or what part of the story stayed with you. And if you believe in stories that honor courage, loyalty, and compassion, please subscribe to the channel so we can keep telling them together. May God bless you and protect you. May He give you wisdom when choices are hard, and courage when the path is unclear. And if this message speaks to you, write Amen in the comments below. Amen.